shall we start?
Good evening, everyone. I am Simon Dove, the co-curator of Crossing the Line, the festival which is co-presenting Ivana's work here at New York Live Arts. I am delighted to introduce the author of this work, Ivana Muller. I thought it would be appropriate this evening to script this talkback in the spirit of the work we have just experienced, but also to make sure it does not wander off into irrelevant, tangential chat. Ivana, this is a script for you.
Thanks.
Don't worry. I have dealt with everything in the script. You do not need to be concerned about what you need to remember to say.
Oh, thanks. But these talkbacks don't disturb me. I really enjoy the spontaneity of them. Sometimes they make you consider things about the work that I maybe have not given so much attention to.
That's great, because the whole idea of these sessions is to talk around the work itself and help to build a broader context for the audience who have just experienced it.
Yes, for sure. And what I like most is that we get to hear what people who have just experienced the work, what impression it made, and what really had the most impact, and maybe also was not so clear or confusing. This is really helpful to me as an artist when I think about my next piece.
Great, that's good. So let's get started. I will start with a few questions, and then we can open it up to the audience. So, Ivana, maybe you could explain a little bit about the genesis of this work. How did you arrive at the work being performed by the audience?
Well, you know, as the cost of actors is increasing, it seemed a good strategy. No, but seriously, why do we not ask the author to explain? After all, she is sitting over there.
Wait, now I get to read. Okay. Oh, thank you. Erkumni doi dikiradu. Now, let's see how this goes without the script. It might be more predictable. Okay, well, thanks, Simon, for scripting.
No, I couldn't resist it given the piece, but for me it was an interesting process because, of course, you feel very empowered when you're writing a script. You can really control the flow and the balance, but having just sat through the experience, I realized that actually it's an incredibly vulnerable position. You're giving the show itself to the audience. So although you've controlled the script, you can certainly not control how it's delivered and therefore the experience for the performer. So I wondered how you deal with that sense of giving up so much control.
Mm-hmm. First of all, good evening, everybody. I'm Ivana Muller. Yes, and it's very nice to do this experience with you. I mean, I'm not supposed to be here, basically, during the script reading, but I can't help myself, being here, because it's always really nice to, just get the experience of every new community reading the script. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, in my work, I'm really very precise when it comes down to directing the performers, really every word, we are working on everything. So it was quite some experience for me, giving up all this and giving it to the people, power to the people. But obviously the idea here is not that every word is being said in a certain way or in the right way or in a perfect way. Indeed, I think what performs here, much more than a script itself, is how people appropriate the script, how they say it, how their voice becomes public by using, let's say, the script as something that sort of holds it. Also, I think what's really interesting is the different idea that people have of how we should speak in theater. Some people, do it with a lot of, let's say, dramatic effort, or some people tonight it was really interesting because it was almost like a language course. because especially in the beginning, a lot of people had difficulties with English. And I think it was really brilliant because somehow it made me really think about the community that comes here, the fact that a lot of people in New York are just foreigners. It made me think about the whole history of New York, this place. And this is wonderful because I think, yeah. So it all comes from the interpretation of the way how people do it. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's really not important then anymore, you know, if it's done well or not. And it's important that we understand what people are saying. And I think a couple of times when it was not audible, people said, what did she say? And then there is a kind of echo in the room. So it's already a beginning of a negotiation. And I think what really performs in this project and his work is everything that happens around that is not scripted. In a way, the script is something extremely fixed, but then on the other hand, it kind of gives like this whole like field of unpredicted, unknown, you know. Yeah.
And I know you're touring it now in not just different cities but different countries. What kind of range of experiences have you had with it in different contexts?
I mean, obviously, every language has its particularity, and also, also every language means a certain mentality. So a language also brings certain cultural ideas within it, you know. And also, every time I slightly change the script for the context in which we perform, because some things are not really interesting, or you know, some things are more relevant than the others, etc. And it's very interesting because we always choose, of course, the language of the community that might come. So for instance, it's not only the language of the country. It so happened that in Germany, when we performed in Berlin, we performed in English because there's such an international community of people living there. So this broken Euro-English is actually some kind of lingua franca of all the people, you know, being in that room. So that was very interesting. On the other hand, like in Dresden, we would do it in German, you know. And also I have to say that the differences are not based on a city or a country. It really is very different from each. Like the group from yesterday, it was very different. Like you were there, like even in the reading group, like it was also really, really different. The fact that, you know, we thought about personalities of roles. There is certain consistency in, for instance, the first person who says, I hate participatory theater, talks about urinating on the floor, being sort of more negative, but we never know who will do it. You know, it's very different, for instance, if the Romeo and Juliet thing is done by a man and a woman, or is done by two women. I mean, suddenly it changes everything. Or, I don't know, the person, you know, who says, I don't know. You know, there's every sentence, basically, it really depends. So it's not about text. It's about textuality, and textuality comes on with the appearance of a body or a person that interprets it. And in that way, for me, this work is really choreographic. It's not like text theater, although text is kind of a dominant part of it. But you know how the voices are traveling, the movement that is being made with the negotiations and all the. For me, I'm a choreographer, so this work really comes from, I'd say, choreographic practice.
But the other thing that happens pretty quickly once we start exchanging scripts and sort of looking forward then to how the others will read it and knowing that you've experienced it too, it quickly builds this sort of cohesion in the group. And I think that seems to be an important part of what you're doing, is building this sort of mini community here. But that seems to be more not just about us making a community, but also us thinking about what happens when we ordinarily go and see a performance, or we ordinarily engage in attending theatre. Is that something that you're interested in exploring?
I mean, I think, you know, that basically every theatre show indeed makes an instant community. And it's always, in that sense, it's always historical. Because it never happens that the same group of people is sitting in the audience and on stage. Every time a show is being performed, it's a historical gathering, so to say. But of course, here we are all much more visible, and it also so happened that after some of the shows, people went together to have a drink and started chatting further and kind of got to know each other some of them have children. No, they don't. But like there is like a potential really to go on, and because we have done something together. Really, we have. It's very unusual to perform a piece in your life with a group of people, and we've just done that. So it's quite. I mean, it's quite something. And also the fact that we all see each other. We do remember faces. We do. I mean. And I think, of course, when you have communities, which here might be the case, that kind of know each other because people are attending shows together or they're working together, you have more this level of recognition and who did that. But sometimes when you do it in kind of like theaters where people are not so much a community, when it's not, because the place here is also people have training, like, there is some kind of, there's not just programming of shows, there is a whole thing happening around it. When you go to more kind of a festival in a theater that is just theater, then you get like a bunch of people that don't know each other and suddenly like experience a certain degree of intimacy, which is rather interesting. And still, people are protected by the code of theater. Sure. The fact is that they know nothing really bad is ever going to happen to them. So.
Good, they hope. Yeah. But in the text, you're also referring to a lot of collective actions that happen, of course, outside here in social contexts and in political contexts. You seem to be asking us to consider that, how we as individuals engage with this kind of community process. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I mean, the thing is that I've never done much of participatory theater, and actually this line, I hate participatory theater. I mean, it really comes from my experience. But I mean, what I always what I always find very uncomfortable is that when you, for instance, sit in your spectator's seat and there is a show happening on stage, and then suddenly somebody invites you, like, come here on stage and just make an idiot out of yourself, because you really don't know, like, the dramaturgy, you don't know the agenda of that other person, and you engage to kind of, a bit different. So, I mean, we wanted to create like a set or like a frame in which everybody will be exactly the same. That means that everybody has the right to choose, like, to read or not to read. And everybody, it's just from the beginning, it's very transparent. It's never like, it's always been really clearly marked in the program what is going to happen. We never try to make the kind of hello effect or like surprise. So it's not working with expectations in that sense, And actually, maybe it's like when we talk about the genesis or the history of the piece, I have to say that the idea about of this piece started to was actually starting end of 2010, beginning of 2011, because there were some real changes in Europe, and especially in the Netherlands, about cultural policies and the place of art and culture in society. And I don't know, we with people that have worked on the show, which is Jonas Rutgerts, Andrea Božić, and David Weber-Krebs, we were thinking about, okay, so how can we change that? We don't agree with that, Basically, we all kind of could vote, but you can't do much through that process. So how can we be political, so to say? Not only in theater, but as citizens, And then this idea of voice, of voicing, of having a voice that seems like your voice, but maybe it's not exactly your voice. All those questions kind of came on the table, and so we thought, okay, so what about? I mean, is the situation that the position of the spectator here could coincide in some ways with the position of a citizen, and how is this then? How can this be translated in some kind of theatrical format that would be interesting? So that's how slowly we came up with this.
And it's also why in kind of telling people about the show ahead of time, you're very clear what's going to happen. I mean, yes. I don't think anyone came. Well, we can ask in a minute, but I don't think anyone was surprised by the fact that they were reading a script. In other words, you're very open and transparent about the process through which you want people to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not like, I got you. it's really like, I think that people who came here most of the time just like are kind of fine that, like they signed that contract by buying the ticket, and I mean, they're just ready for some kind of experiment. And yeah. So I mean, this is obviously, yeah.
Maybe
clear.
some were hoping for better colleagues, though.
No, but actually, I realized also like it has happened that this piece was read by people who are like professionals, and it was not as interesting because I mean, if I would want this piece to be read perfectly, I would obviously ask just performers to do it. So it wasn't really meant to be that way. Yeah, and also I think what I'm really looking for, and that's something that again kind of goes to this realm of textuality and something that can happen. It's not what I was explaining to you yesterday. It's moments of like something emotional or something that is not at all in this very transparent, very conceptually clear, rational way of talking. That you have moments. I really tonight and often when I participate, I'm always like I'm almost very empathetic with people that are reading. Like are they gonna make it? Like are they gonna make it? Or it's just like sometimes the moments of beauty also arise from this. And I think it's very lovely that this potential is there. So it's
yeah. No, I mean that happened with the dialogue too.
Oh, it was so beautiful. It was like incredible. Yeah.
It was so fragile and so. Yeah.
But that's not really important. And it's also the fact that I've never seen this like kind of tension before also, because there is a lot of things that are playing at that moment, like the exposure, the fact of doing it right, but knowing that I don't know. And for me, it's really beautiful.
Can we talk a bit about language? Because I mean, knowing your earlier work, the words that are used and your use of language in performance is really important, and I would probably say it's one of the most important tools that you use, and you're very interested in the way language frames the way we perceive something or the way we experience something. Whereas I think in this piece you're using language but in a different way. It's almost language is being used almost as a plateau from which people can take off. You're less concerned with the words themselves than in the possibilities that opens up for people. Do you
well, you see, when you can't, let's say, when I work like normally, I mean, there is never normal because every project is a bit different. So far, I was really assisting upon the musicality, like how you speak the text. So this you can work on when you rehearse for many months and everything like that. Here, obviously, the musicality had to be somewhere else. It couldn't be in how things should be pronounced, because otherwise I would just just pull my hair all the time and not be. It's not important. This is not. So indeed, yes. I mean, the approach to the language was very different. We knew that it has to be something that people can read easily. So it couldn't be like a very complicated thing. Something that you could instantly kind of go through. So sentences that were they were much shorter, and it was very much like a spoken language. Yeah. But again, I mean, it's not. It's as I said in the beginning, I would never publish this text.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't make sense. I would never publish it. I think it really works only if it's performed by the people. So that's why, for me, it's like still a piece of choreography.
Well, exactly. Can we go back to, because your training was in choreography, and that's where a lot of your practices emerge from. You talked about it earlier, but I'm interested in just you elaborating a little bit more about how you feel you're choreographing, in a sense, our experience of the work.
Well, I mean, first of all, there's this understanding of the movement, that in my case is not necessarily connected with the physical movement of a body, of a human body. The sense of movement for me can go from like a small gesture to a big political movement, without being too pretentious. But, thinking about it. Also, the idea of body is not necessarily a human physical body. It can be a body of a text. It can be a body of a community. It can be, you see what I mean? So I think in combining those very wide ideas about, like broad ideas of what one can be, then, I mean, I engaged in this sense in the idea of choreography. And I'm thinking, when I'm thinking about text, I'm more thinking about, let's say, where is the musicality of it? Where is the rhythm of it? Where can it move like ideas? So where is that? So my texts are never really psychological. You know, they're not telling a story in the sense of, you know, that we are. I mean, of course, we are here characters, but we more or less, like every time we do this, people say it's amazing. Like it's just like he would say that like in a real life. You know, like. And people feel that, I mean, most of the sentences they could somehow. So, you know, and then was maybe the idea was like, how can we vehicle, how can we move or this idea or this potential of somebody saying a certain thing, you know? How can we imagine even a person who says, I would like to fall in love tonight, you know, like... how can, for instance, also, and now we come to the other side of the story, how can the person that we see represent the idea, you know? And we don't know who will read it, but we all represent it. I mean, if I look at you, I mean, I have a certain idea about you even without, I mean, I know you, but, you know, your accent, the way you dress, your glasses, everything kind of plays, you know?
You stopped there.
But you see what I mean? And also, this is for me very interesting.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I mean, you notice things about yourself that you know about other people. Sometimes you're not allowed to say them. But you know, you kind of read all those things. And maybe when you have professional performers, you don't do because they kind of make part of the kind of theatrical setup. But here, I mean, I really think, oh, he could be like Italian or he could be Russian. Or where is he from? You know, and then all sorts of prejudice about what, or fixed ideas that I have about Italians, Russians, or whatever, storm over me. And then I start to realize, oh my God, I'm just so fixed with certain things. And then the reflection starts, like how I perceive the other, how I perceive myself. And for me, that's very interesting. It's definitely something that's very interesting, and what we really insisted upon it, we didn't want to give everybody a script to read, because once you start reading, you stop watching the others. Yeah. The idea actually was that there is always this relationship between a performer and a spectator, and you do really look at others. And for me, the most loveliest thing that it can happen in theater is watch others watch. I mean, I often, when I watch my own shows, I don't really look so much what's happened on stage, because I totally, I'm sure it's perfect, because I trust my performance very much. I really look how people look. And this is wonderful here, how this opportunity to do that.
And humor is also a big part of your work. I'm just wondering what your sense of your use of humor is, because of course it helps bring us together, it helps make us more comfortable, but is there other reasons for it too?
Well, I think that first of all, humor is something that engages you physically. Like when you laugh, you already kind of, you know, your physical state changes, and it's true that, you know, you laugh with others. When somebody laughs in the room, like everybody kind of who feels like laughing will start laughing as well. So it's something very interesting about it. There's a kind of manifestation of presence, or, you know, ways of looking at things. And on a more conceptual level, I think humor is a way to create a certain distance and to create a possibility to see something that we sort of know in a different way. So that's why I think, you know, I always, and I kind of, I don't know, I'm like that more or less. I like a good laugh. So I guess it kind of comes naturally, you know, in the text writing.
Yeah, great. So let's open it up to see what questions there are or what responses are amongst us. Yes.
I didn't realize I was sitting next to the playwright, but I'm just fascinated by I don't know what you call it, the nonsense language that was in there and what that was about.
What do you mean by nonsense?
Well, the
language?
words like are those real words or in some language that I don't know? Or
well, that's exactly the question that was like there. You know, like a lot of people like wonder if that's Estonian or if that's Croatian or if that's like existing language. Actually, when introducing this, I was more thinking about the idea of foreign and foreigner and the language we don't speak. And we were also thinking, like, when writing a script, what would be the thing that people would not read? And then I thought maybe things that they don't understand. But then, I mean, everybody reads it in a different kind of way. But also, there is a foreigner amongst us. It's a very interesting idea, you know. So basically, that's it wasn't my idea. Wasn't to create a nonsense language, but more to introduce this questioning about the idea of meaning and vehicling of meaning and reproducing a meaning which we don't understand.
It makes it scarier to read those lines. I was scared to read those lines because I didn't know if they were another language, and then I was butchering this something. So, I mean, I think if that's why people maybe don't want to read those lines, it's because they, the intimidation of that.
But it was interesting today because I felt that in the beginning some people had a hard time reading English. So, you know, there was another idea of foreign, and so it was kind of, it was almost like, how do you say ricochet? How do you say it when you throw a stone on the water and that's ripple? So it was a skimming stone in the piece. It kind of repeated itself in another form.
Can you talk a little bit more about that idea of this feeling of safety, that you didn't want anyone to feel like they were going to be making a fool of themselves? Is that, was I right?
It's not that it's, you know,
you didn't want to make them feel unsafe. Is that right?
It's not about safety or not safety. Maybe I just used the wrong word. I just wanted that everybody is in the same position, that nobody is being exposed, you know, in another way. And I was just thinking of myself, like, having to participate in something like this, and I thought the only way to accept it would be that, you know, if there is this kind of equality, although there is never really equality. First of all, because we are just very different people. The secondly, like, where our capacities of, you know, of speak in public, or so that's very interesting. Although you set a system to be equal, you immediately start seeing differences, and that's really great. Makes you think about democracy and having a voice and what does it mean.
What were earlier versions of this like?
What were the earlier versions? I mean, we've done so many shows of this already, so it's a bit difficult to talk about every single one. But for instance, what sometimes happens, and it didn't happen so much, is that people start talking outside of a script. So they really start to, like, discuss issues, and then they come back to the script, because also they want to have the ending together. And the script is the promise that there will be the future and there will be the end of it, you know. So sometimes, I don't know, sometimes, you know, people got very excited and, you know, started to walk around and wanted to be physical. Sometimes it was very uneventful, really boring. It can happen, like, you never know really how. But something always happens, you know, and there is always, like, let's say, a problem that comes, like, out, and that's interesting for me, because this piece is constantly creating new problems.
So it's very bright in here, and I understand for practical reasons why, you know, to be able to read a script, that's very good. But it's kind of like the least theatrical element to be sitting in a very bright room while a performance is going on. And I was wondering what your decisions behind that were. Did you think maybe we can do it in the dark with a Kindle or something? Or?
No, I mean, we talked about different options in lights, but then, because it was really important that during the show, okay, I'm now cheating, but there is no presence of other authorities. There is no technician, there is no performer, there is no dramaturg, there is no author, there is, you see what I mean? So it's really the community of performance inspectors. So in the beginning there was a technician, but it was really not good, because whenever there was a problem, people said, like, how do we do it? So how do we distribute the scripts? You see what I mean? And in that respect, I think, and I didn't want to work with this very kind of mysterious light changing, because there is no reason for it. And I think it's really spectacular to have this light like that all the time, because you can always see people's faces. And so for me, that's also, if you think about not only functionalism but aesthetics, for me, it's the most beautiful.
And next.
Yeah, my question was also about the space, and I was wondering if you could say a little bit about why the space is choreographed in this way, why the two rows, like right now you're both sort of turning around to stare back at us, so that sort of exchange, like the orientation of the seats and the kind of absence that is the stage space, if you could say something about those decisions.
Yes. So the four sides is obviously so that people can see each other. So potentially there's everybody can see each other. The fact that it's not a circle, because a lot of people ask like, but if this is a community, why aren't we sitting in a circle? Which is really interesting, that there is like the first idea that people have when thinking about representation of a community. And then I just think that for me, we tried, obviously, we also got that idea in the beginning. But what is very interesting is to preserve the idea of theater. Because we talk a lot about theater and what theater is, what representation is, what role-playing is, what voice is. And I think also when you are in a square, you still have a possibility to hide a bit. Because, you know, if you do this and you are in a circle, people will come and give, because everybody's visible at all times. But if you do like this here, people will realize that you don't want to. So it's, and also the fact that people then can be more physical. You know, they can because people do turn, and so for me, yeah, that was the reason to choose the four fronts.
I was curious about the way the script starts, because it starts with a conversation about being in the situation that we're in, and like in thinking about like where. I mean, I think that presents like a very clear politics about theater and the situation. So that had you ever thought about just starting with a story, which is also written as simply, but that wasn't necessarily a sort of meta discussion of the situation already, or like was that something that just was interesting?
Yeah, but I mean, there was no sense of making a story because this is what we share together. This is our story. So it was obvious to start working with the idea in which we are, you know, because it's both like representational, but it's experiential as well. So in that sense, it was very clear. And I don't have a story to tell. It's not, I mean, in that kind of a story, you see what I mean? It had to be a piece about us somehow, whatever that us means. And that starts the questioning of what us is. It starts also, we had to start with something that sounds relatively banal, but it's also just to give a chance to people to get used to the fact of, you know, that they are reading, to hear their voices being like displayed in a public space and all this. So at first it sounds a little bit silly, but I think it does engage immediately, like all sorts of questions that come later, you know, like, yeah.
Maybe one or two more questions.
One question, it's related to an earlier question, but during the development of the script, and I don't know if there was any rehearsal process, but did it ever go in like a very different direction? Like, did you ever consider it like with a much bigger audience or smaller audience? Or I'm just wondering if the script was always more or less this, or if there were other iterations of it that then you decided were not as good as this.
Yeah, there were many. I mean, we did test readings. We dragged all our friends into misery. No, but it was very interesting writing this piece because it was you have to anticipate people you don't know. You have to anticipate what they could possibly say. So a lot of these roles were based somehow people we knew, in a way. Well, we thought of paths when I hate participatory. I mean, there were people that kind of helped us to. But afterwards, just to have some kind of coherence, you see. Then we were testing things like, I think this amount, so let's say from 35 to 60 is the best amount in order to have some kind of sense of crowd, but on the other hand, to preserve this intimacy. Intimacy, not this closeness in a way. And this sense of being forgotten in some room somewhere, this kind of sort of isolated community. Because, and also the funny thing is that we did it with 100 people, 120 was the biggest amount. But the problem is that then you have a lot of voyeurism. The sense of engagement is very different because not everybody gets to read. Now, here we've heard almost everybody's voice, which is really great. I mean, you know, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of empirical, the way that we decided about, yeah.
Have you planned your role or lack thereof tonight? And the reason I ask this is because when you had the little tete-a-tete with the person who originally handed you the script, and I at least didn't hear it, but it seemed that you had opted out. And that for me was an important part of it was a little bit like, oh, is that, wow, that's an option.
Normally,
that I hadn't actually thought of.
Yeah. But that's very interesting. So you can ask yourself, why haven't you talked about it? You know, because there is an option. You don't have it. But I mean, the thing is, why I did it is just I don't feel comfortable so much reading. You know, because it's not that everybody knew that I was the author, but it just came really not at all calculated. Like. I don't know. I just felt like I don't want to read.
But usually you're not in.
No, usually I'm not in, so it's like.
There was an empty seat.
No, I understand.
But it did happen many times that people said no, and people were very not because they are like they hated it or something. They were very excited, but they just they would say, okay, I would start stuttering or something. I just so like shy to speak in public that they would just not be able to do it. So they would say no. By the way, but it was crazy. Like in Berlin, we performed the piece, and there was a lady, and she had a speech impediment, and she decided to read, and it was absolutely fantastic because she took like 5 times longer to read a sentence than anybody else, but she kept on insisting in reading, and suddenly something happened that was really very strong, you know, like because she could have said no, of course, but it was really like very interesting. Yeah, so no, it wasn't premeditated.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Have somebody ever transgressed completely the reading? Something like, okay, I'm not going to read, I'm going to talk about myself, I'm going to tell a story or something.
People tried, but the community wouldn't allow it.
That's nice.
I don't know if it's nice, but it's interesting. I mean, it's just like never ever.
You should come back on Friday and try it.
Yeah, because it's very interesting because you're in a situation, you know, every time you become a public speaker, you have a power to change the opinions of the others. And here you even have a power to change the destiny of the whole community in a way. And it's very rare that people feel that, I mean, that they want to embrace that power. But some people do. But then it's interesting because there are all these mechanisms that others just don't want others to decide about their future. So, you know, it's there you can start analyzing a lot about how we behave together. And,
Well, there was that moment. I mean,
it was great.
I'm going to read the stage directions because I want to break a rule. And then
and
this woman...
It was really interesting. She was the one that
policed me, you know, except that she had made this whole
is
performance
crazy.
at the beginning of the night about how she already thought the show was bad. And
But she wouldn't shut up through the whole performance, though. She kept talking.
Right. She was really seeking attention all the time. And she did it also by not wanting to read it and reading another script, I mean, the piece of paper, which is interesting because she could have gone out. There's nobody, like, on her back, you know, if you don't. This is, by the way, it's very interesting, this method of, like, reading a book or reading something else during the show. You know, in Paris, there is a Théâtre de la Ville, which is, like, a very known theater, and this is the way, like, how people protest when they see a bad show. But then you have a whole row of people reading a book. Which is terrible. But it's kind of known that like, people go to Théâtre de la Ville more to show off themselves than to watch what's happening on stage.
And to show a book they're reading.
Yeah, but she really, I mean, it's really interesting. This lady became a character. She really kind of like created a role of herself.
Well, she is a character. She's been a presenter, a producer herself.
But we don't know this. I don't know this. It's not important. I think she really existed within this.
She was a Libra, that's what
And a Libra.
I allowed her to...
So good. Let's... continue this at the bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's all have children.